All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is AJ. I'm a popcorn robot mentor and UCLA instructor. Today, we're going to learn a little about Shopify. So, what is Shopify? Shopify is an e commerce platform that sold over $4.6 billion in revenue in 2021 alone. Of the 1.6 million websites that use Shopify, Figs is ranked number 64. So today, our guest is Figs full stack engineer, Kelvin Tsoi. Just as a reminder, after the interview, if anyone has any questions, we'll take interview questions from everyone else. All right. So welcome, Kelvin. Thank you for doing this interview with us.
Thanks for the invite, AJ.
All right. Okay. So before we talk about Figs, tell us your story. Why did you get into coding?
Uh, well, actually, it all started here at Popcorn Robot with you, but
Oh.
I I was running this business with my roommate at the time, and we were trying to do this meal delivery business using an e-commerce platform. And as you know, e-commerce and a meal delivery business are have some commonality, but they're very different. So we needed a little bit more customization, a little bit more development, basically application development, and that's when I reached out to you on and hanged out with you, and you started teaching me coding, and it's turned out into an application that we use to kind of mold WooCommerce at the time into a meal delivery app.
So what was it that you needed to get done that you couldn't do when you didn't know how to code?
Well, um, I guess particular thing was mostly the very first issue I had was the checkout. We needed a customized checkout, and we're very localized because it's a meal delivery. Obviously, we're not like shipping all over the country like a e-commerce platform would have FedEx or DHL to do. So we needed a more localized app, and by localized I mean the ability to pick delivery times, the ability to enter your address. Most basic thing is tell you if your address is out of range. Like we don't do any
Hmm.
business there, so all of this
Yeah,
needed like some custom development.
got it. And then so then you were able to code and then solve those problems,
Yep,
right?
yep.
Cool. So what were you doing before you were coding? What was your career?
Completely different. 180. I was working in banking. I was working in for a Wall Street firm doing
Hmm.
trading, and yeah, on the execution desk. We had it was a little bit coding involved, but it was really basic scripting, maybe some Excel stuff, but nothing, not actual web development, nothing like a full stack application or anything like that.
Hmm. And so how did these two careers compare to each other? So working with when Wall Street versus like coding, like how do you compare them?
Uh, Apple and oranges, to tell the truth, because when you work for Wall Street, when you work for a bank and trading capital markets, your day ends when the market ends. So there's
Hmm.
no like take home work, there's no extra work, but it's very intense. Everything's measured in seconds and like milliseconds.
Hmm.
So it's very yeah, it's very at the moment intense, fast, uh, less creative. It's more almost robotic in a way, I would say, compared to what I do now.
Hmm.
Um, I guess the joy is developing a tool that you know is making someone's work a lot easier
Hmm.
in a way.
Hmm. Understood.
Versus the other job was more like you're providing a service to someone versus you designing that service in a way.
Right, right, right. So, just out of curiosity, what's your dream job? I mean, excluding figs, of course, but like, what would be your dream job? Are you looking at trying to go and create another entrepreneurial business, or do you want to stay working?
Well, I would say within the last few years, definitely there's I have learned a lot about business and entrepreneurship. As you know, our company went IPO last year, so I started at the company when it was like 20 people. Now it's over 200 people, and it's almost like a $5 billion company now, market cap wise. So, my dream job, I think the next phase after this is more mentorship, more advising in a way, just because I've seen it all. I've know the little bumps in the road to get to this point. I could provide valuable feedback on what to do, what not to do. So ideally, consulting or some kind of advisory mentorship, even a little bit teaching. Who knows?
Yeah, we can use you on Popcorn Robot in the future.
Yeah, but I have started I have been involved with a few other startups just as consulting roles and just telling them about how things are in the real world versus how technology can be integrated and used to their advantage, type of thing.
Very nice, very cool. So you mentioned you learn coding at Popcorn Robot. That's awesome. That's what you're one of my college students. So my question is, why didn't you learn on your own?
I tried. I tried everything. I bought it. I think the most valuable thing you gave me, AJ, was really going at my own pace, but pushing me in the right places that I don't know, watching a video you just don't really get. It's a very following an online curriculum in a video is very strict. Like everything's like planned out, doled out for you. But there's subtle nuances. No same people kind of learn the same way. There's little subtle nuances in how we learn, and I think that was the cool thing about just being with Popcorn Robot. It's like you can interact with someone. If you had trouble, you can reach out to someone. This is something you don't really get trying to learn on your own. But I will stress that your program really built like a foundation. So now, like looking in hindsight, looking at those videos, learning something new isn't so difficult. But I need to learn a way of doing it, basically, and that's what this program kind of gave me.
Yeah, that's the one thing I think a lot of the misconception. I think every developer needs to self-learn, but the one thing is that makes it a lot more easy is when you have a foundation you can build off of, so you can self-learn. But man, when you don't have a foundation, it becomes really challenging.
Yeah, because you get stuck at certain points. Like for me, it was a lot of database stuff, right? Like, and that's probably the defining feature of a full stack developer, right? Like the database, the abstraction of the databases and stuff like that. But just kind of having you just point out, like smooth out the bumps a little bit was fantastic. It really helped smooth the transition over.
So what advice would you give new developers today?
First of all, like you have to have the right motivation. Like when I first met you, probably, God, man, like 5 years ago or something like that, quite a bit. The motivation back then was purely, wow, developers, they get to make a lot of money, they get to, like do their own thing in their own schedule. But the reality is, like, if that's your main motivation, like lifestyle, then you're not going to get very far because the space moves very quickly. Technology changes and you have to be on top of it. You have to self-drive. So you have to like do something and you're like, well, this is really cool. I want to learn more and push yourself to be ahead of the game. Because honestly, if you're not from a CS background, you're sort of going into the marketplace at like not really like a lower level, but like an unproven level, even though, the argument is like the CS background doesn't really do anything, but it's a piece of paper. But because you're at a lower level, you have to work a little bit harder to prove yourself, is what I say. And you got to have that drive. You got to have that. You got to think it's fun where you're all constantly learning new stuff and pushing yourself.
Do you feel you see things differently now that you know how to code versus before you knew how to code?
100%. 100%.
How so?
Like when you look at application, you don't just see like, this is a button. You think about all the inner workings. You think about the database. You think about the scaling issues that they have. You don't really like look at it from a user perspective. You actually look at it from a technical perspective. which is really cool because sometimes you'd be like, oh, I can do this better, and then you'll go home and you're motivated and you whip out application that basically replicates it. And I think that's really powerful when you can kind of see how you kind of visualize in your head how the app's built, and you'd be like, then you start to see where it can be better or what technologies can use to make it better and improve it, type of thing. And that's really cool.
Yeah. Actually, one of my students also, she talked about, so she's in fashion, and she talked about how after learning how to code, she started developing, she called her the developer mind. And she said it's really interesting because it was, she started seeing things more technical, more logical, more constructed. And it really started changing the way she was solving problems. So very much more logical. And I always thought that was interesting because yeah, I feel like there's these two worlds, and there's a creative world and a logical world. And the creative world is more, to me, it feels more about possibilities, what can possibly happen, and logical is more about what what can we do with what we have. So it's much more grounded in reality. And I
Yeah, yeah.
feel that that's one thing I think when you learn how to code, you start to, there's a lot more limitations in the world, but it's also more realistic. And I always thought that was interesting.
Yeah, not to be a Debbie Downer, like when you're doing that, but like today, like I was advising one of the startups, and they had they hired a UI designer, and she had like all these mock-ups made in Figma, and it looked beautiful. I mean, the application looked beautiful, but I'm I'm like looking at it, I'm thinking about the technical details because they want the app made, and I'm just
Right.
like, oh, if you want this feature, it's really nice, but it's gonna bump you back this many weeks because of this complexity. If there any
Right.
way we can kind of make it easier, type of thing. But yeah,
Right.
I do kind of 100%. That's how I feel whenever I look at things, and it's that creativity is like you said, it's like endless, and then like the engineering development side, not to be a Debbie Down, but put more real manage expectations, put realism
Right.
into it based off the timeline.
Right. 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 Very cool. So you work at Figs now. So how did to work with them? I mean, like, I would love to hear like what was the difference from when you first started as a 20-man company all the way to a $5 billion company? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like if you look at the market cap, it's about 3 to 5 bill. It just depends on where the stock price is at, I guess. But yeah, like I first joined very small team, very intimate. I wouldn't say disorganized, but just with when you deal with companies that size, they kind of everyone wants things done at the same time, so there's a lot of chaos. There's no product roadmap.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting to see as the company grew. There's just like more and more uh, organization. This is where the things that you can only learn through like an early stage startup, kind of building up to this. Our first thing was our hire a product manager, and he brought like a very Scrum mindset, so a very organized product map, so we can deliver and ship things on time. Versus
Mm-hmm.
you coding up an application, suddenly marketing wants this thing done, and you have to get yanked off this project to go on that, and it's like this context switching, which really delays a lot of development and stuff like that. So as we grew older, it went from, I wouldn't say it went from less fun because obviously um, each little era in the company has different fun elements to it. But I would
Mm-hmm.
say in the beginning, it was a lot of hands-on building application, like full stack applications, versus now we're able to bring in more talent and it's more focused. So it's, I wouldn't say less work, it's more um, sort of keeping the ship running type of thing versus
Mm-hmm.
just organizing, maintaining stuff, writing test coverage to the, it became from developing applications to more like writing test coverage to make sure things don't
Mm-hmm.
break.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's more defined, more nuanced now, like more focused.
Mm. So what do you, how big is your development team right now? Or how big was it when you first started, and how big is it compared to now?
When it first started, there was maybe 3 developers, one front end, two full stack, and I was one of the full stack, so 3 developers. Now we probably have 9 developers.
Wow. So it's
But
changed. It must have changed.
some of them are contracts. They're not. I guess full time, probably around 6.
Hmm. So what's the difference between front and full stack developers?
Um, Very blurry. I mean, since we're a small company, technically everyone is very capable. We just have what we call specialties, right? Me being more of a pure full stack, I tend to be put in places where they need sort of like this prototyping of things. Like they don't know if it's going to be sticking around or not. They just need me to pump out stuff to provide like maybe a band-aid solution or something like to bridge gaps or help automate stuff. That's one aspect of it. And being full stack, you do kind of get thrown into wherever they need help in. So like if there's like a mural that needs to be deployed and they're having problems or they can't allocate resources, they might ask me to kind of go in there and help them out. So it's not like I'm not as fast as the front end, but I can do the job, you know. So it's really just specialties at this point.
Hmm. And then, so how many front end developers do you have compared to full stack developers right now?
I'm the only full stack developer. Front end, we probably have 4 front end people,
Wow.
two back end.
Wow. So majority is still very front end heavy then.
Yeah, because this is the nature of the business. Because the nature of the business is not very dynamic in data. Like we're not Uber, where you have to ping the location of this car all the time. It's just basically e-commerce data that never changes. So everything is front heavy. It's loaded up front. There's no need to ping server for updated data on anything because the name of a product doesn't change once it's published, right? So, and in e-commerce is a thing where speed is very important. So that's why it's very front end heavy. The front end code is actually very complex, but it gives a very smooth experience if you've been to the website.
Cool. So why don't you guys just sell on Amazon? Why did you guys go to create Shopify to begin with? What's the whole point? What is the benefit of that?
I think Shopify is more of a platform, like a marketplace, right? Well, Shopify is a platform, but Amazon is more like a marketplace.
Right.
I think the biggest advantage of Shopify is really what they call direct to consumer, really a brand company. So you get to own your brand. As you know, like there's the price of the product, and there's usually like a markup associated with branding, right? Like we value Louis Vuitton as more expensive than I don't know, like Champion or whatever like that. And all of that is because of marketing branding. They sell a certain lifestyle, and you just simply do not have control over that in Amazon because you put your stuff on Amazon and everything is bought through Amazon. And through Shopify, they're basically just a CMS and a checkout. Well, you can strip it down to a CMS and a checkout. And with Shopify, you really get to control everything from the look and feel of your website, the type of typography you want to use. You really get to create this brand and sell this lifestyle through their site. And you cut out the middleman, which is Amazon.
Do you guys think that you guys benefited? Do you think that the secret to your guys' growth was largely because you guys went to Shopify? Like, I mean, would you have been able to grow this fast on Amazon, you think?
For sure. I think Amazon will probably give you a faster growth. If you're really good on Amazon, you're really good. It's also very competitive. But another advantage of having Shopify and not Amazon is that you actually get to control your own data too. Like, and part of the whole D2C thing and selling direct to consumer is knowing the consumer. And that's just a part of e-commerce, like knowing how to market things in a certain way to certain people, which all rolls into the whole branding of the company. But services are definitely amazing, a double-edged sword, I would say, because on the one hand, it allows any company to grow really quick because it's like abstracted away where they can focus on certain things. Like if we would build an e-commerce thing, there's a lot of rules and regulations around checkout, like PCI compliance. You have to make sure data that is kept by that has email addresses meet a certain requirement. There's a lot of stuff like that. And Shopify, that proposition is like, hey, you don't have to worry about it. We We take care of the PCI compliance. We do everything for you. You just focus on the branding and selling of your product.
Interesting.
And they are a
And
victim of their own success if you think about it, because I think they provided such a good platform for brands to grow. Now the brands out on there are bigger than they probably could have ever imagined. So now they're getting to a point where some of the brands are exceeding the capabilities of their own services. And then there's a question of, should those brands kind of venture out and create their own e-commerce platform type of thing?
did you guys ever try any other platform other than Shopify, or was that always the one you guys went with?
That was always the one we went with. I think the reason why Shopify is because their integration with marketing tools were really good at the time, and really there were no competitors about like probably I don't know 5, 6, 7 years ago that were as mature as Shopify. And what I meant is like when you're a DTC shop, you're very marketing driven because you're trying to drive that brand, and you rely on things like uh, data, like what kind of people visit your site, what kind of people are looking at your site type of thing. So that's the one thing that Shopify had really early on that a lot of its competitors didn't have. I think nowadays you could argue that BigCommerce is up there, but Shopify is a lot more robust just because they've been in the space longer.
So, what are the difficulties you guys encountered that you wouldn't have encountered if you were on Amazon because you went on Shopify?
I think it rolls back into more branding. It would have kind of sort of seen as another Amazon sold on Amazon type of brand, which can kind of get lost. And when you're on Amazon, you're competing with a bunch of sellers, right? So ultimately, Amazon controls what people see and what's in the front, like on the top of the list versus the bottom, right? So there's always like that fear of Amazon. Amazon is very customer centric. They're very customer focused and not seller focused. So they tend to kind of, in lack of a better word, screw over sellers in the long run. And there's been a lot of controversy with this. So yeah, I think that was the scariest thing because like I think the one thing everyone worries about is Amazon Basic because they have so much data on what sells well and what doesn't sell well. There's every seller on Amazon I know, and this is outside of work. Every seller on Amazon fears that if they ever succeed in Amazon, that their products will get knocked off and the Amazon Basic version will be created.
Right, right. So, do you think that if you were to summate it, when should a company sell on Amazon? When should a company spin off and do their own Shopify e-commerce platform?
If it's purely off volume, like you're just like buying stuff, listing it, selling it, Amazon is a great proposition because it's vertically integrated, right? They care of the logistic, they care of the warehouse facilities for you. They provide a platform and an interface for you to list your product and sell. So it's really you don't have to do much development on it. I mean, you could automate some of your day-to-day processes of uploading your product catalog or whatnot, but really it's just like straight to the point, sell it. On Shopify, it's a lot different because you do have to worry about your fulfillment. A lot of mom and pop stores kind of do their own fulfillment and they hire what they call 3PLs to do it, like third-party logistics, and they will do the warehouse aspect for you, similar to what they call FBA, fulfilled by Amazon. So fulfilled by Amazon is what you ship the product to Amazon and they take care of everything for you. They ship it out and stuff. But on Shopify, you have to do everything yourself. But on the other hand, you get to create more value for your brand because you have full control over everything.
So then how much development knowledge do you need in order to sell on Shopify, to create your own Shopify platform?
Definitely more than Amazon, but I will say it's what you make it, because when you first create a Shopify store, you have basically a blank template. So there's these templates, boilerplates that basically you don't have to do anything. Just load up your products in the CMS and everything just works. Now there's an aspect of this business called growth hacking, and really it's growing through the company through non-organic means. So that means paying Google, Facebook, whatever to send people to your site. And depending on the interactions of your site can lead to higher conversion. So in the e-commerce space, a 4% conversion rate is very good. Very, very good. It means 100 people that visit your website, 4 people are going to buy. In reality, probably less than 2. That seems to be on the low end. High end would be 4 to 6. So really, it depends on things on how fast your website loads, how fast can they navigate things when they add to cart. You know, like Amazon had a survey, I think a study where the more stopgaps you remove between the customer and the final screen, the purchasing screen, the more likely they're going to buy.
Right.
So then, like the Shopify, you can use the boilerplate, but then if you're like, wow, our sales are really plateauing, you have to start like what they call optimizing, right? You have to like start making the website faster, making these one-click buy buttons, stuff like that, just to make it easier for the customer to buy things. And that's where the development aspect comes in Shopify.
So that's where you need a lot. So how much custom development do you need, or is it not required much? Just how far do you want to take it?
Yeah, you can do it yourself. Certainly, there's enough documentation and knowledge and information to do it yourself. There are people that create Shopify apps, so it has a whole app ecosystem of people developing these applications that do this stuff. But yeah, it's really up to you. If you want to do it yourself, you totally could. There's definitely a lot of documentation, and Shopify encourages that. But then you can use applications to do it. But the problem with applications, they might provide an instant solution. However, it could also provide sort of more complications down the line, right? Like how well does that app integrate with other apps? And you start having these problems of app integrations, basically. So sometimes if you want to remove the app integration part, like one app depending on another app, you might want to do everything yourself. But however, doing everything yourself requires time and knowledge. So it's really, I would say anyone that's looking to get in this space really should weigh in where your sales projections are, where you want to be in a certain time period, and then you can figure out, hey, should I hire a custom developer to create this app, or should I use off-the-shelf apps to get me there type of thing.
So what do you guys do? Go ahead.
In our case at Figs, it really came down to that we exceeded the limitations of Shopify.
Really?
And well, we couldn't find any apps that could solve the issues, so they had to hire developers to do it, and it was just cheaper to hire a developer than hiring a contractor type of thing. A lot more closer integration, maybe a lot better communications on business needs. So that's where I got my first hire, was from that aspect.
So what does Figs do to enhance Shopify? Like what do you guys do on development wise?
So when I first joined, it was a lot of sort of optimization on front end, just making the website run faster. And if you think about Figs, we have a lot of different colors, right? We have a lot of different sizes, extra small to extra large, right? We have a bunch of different fits, petite, regular, and stuff like that. And if you combine all those products together, those variants, that's a lot of variants, right? And that's a really slow loading speed. I remember one of our web pages took 20 seconds to load. You think about it, if you were a shopper and you visit a website and it took 20 seconds to load, are you going to buy anything? Most likely not, right? So you have to figure out ways to speed it up. And because Shopify was a server rendered application, every time it had to ping and get all these variants, which is a massive product catalog, and render it. And we're like, one of the things is like, well, it doesn't need nothing changes. So if you can static that data, it loads a lot quicker. And just changing that speed increased the conversion rates a lot.
Right.
Yeah, it's just choosing the battles. Okay. And then later on, they wanted more integrations with the warehouse, which was a separate service we were using. So we had a service for e-com. We had a service for the warehouse. Two systems didn't really talk to each other. So we kind of created apps to kind of bridge the gap in between and help automate stuff between the two apps.
Okay, very cool. So how does Figs measure the difference between a good and a bad developer? Like, what are they measuring for success in a developer role?
Well, I think the most feared thing is the whiteboard, right? But I can tell you that, and I'm part of the interviewing process. So if anyone out there actually makes it to Figs to get interviewed, I might be in the interview. But to tell you the truth, um, technical skill is one thing, but it's not everything. It's really your attitude. The last people we hired didn't necessarily finish the whiteboarding exam. We just like their thought process. We like their attitude. And sure, when you're small, when you're really small, they tend to hire really experienced people. But as the company becomes bigger and the roles become more specified, you can be less top heavy. You can hire more mids. You can hire more juniors because the hierarchy of things is like the mids will kind of mentor the juniors, and then the seniors kind of the mids type of thing. So as it grow bigger, it just kind of spread out, and we could hire more developers of varying skill set. But I wouldn't say they were like super amazingly good. It's just their attitude towards learning was phenomenal, and I think that's the best thing you can do in an interview. Is always ask questions, sounds enthusiastic about the business. Like a lot of feedback, because people want to know how you think, because they're really testing you how it is to maybe work with you one day, not really like, can they build this app? Because I think at that point, everyone knows that everyone can build something, but are they easy to work with type of thing.
So what's the difference between a good and a bad developer attitude? Like, what are you guys looking at?
So like, I say this a lot. I say this like, everyone that we hire is capable of doing a full stack application. So to me, a full stack application isn't super important, because I could yank anyone and they can do the same thing, but we each have a knowledge expertise. So if I'm not very good at front end, I know I can reach out to my front end developers, and they would be enthusiastically willing to teach me what they know and help me out. A bad developer would just be very confrontational, like doesn't really want to help out, very I'm better than you mindset. And those are the people the whole interview process is designed to kind of weed those people out. So I've been in interviews where it's my test, right? Like I'm giving out the test and I'm telling them, I'm giving them little hints, like you shouldn't do that. That's not how this test works. And if they kind of bite back, and I've had this in interviews where they bite back and tell me that I'm wrong, those are the people that you kind of don't want to work with, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really funny because
whatever.
Huh?
Is the cockiness is like you can't deal with, like the ego.
Yeah.
Those are the bad developers.
Yeah. One of my friends who works at a FANG company, he actually says he does the very same exact thing. During an interview, he will actually sometimes even point out. So like, let's say somebody writes code on a whiteboard and it's fine. Sometimes he will point out something where he's wrong about it. Like he'll say, oh, you should do it another way. And he's wrong. And what he's looking for is what's their response? Because are they like, it's like you said, do they just bite back and go like, you don't know what you're talking about? Or are they like, well, let me see. Well, I'll tell you why I don't do it that way.
Yeah.
The way you respond to criticism is a real big thing in, I think, the world where people look for. And it's really interesting because everyone I talk to in terms of hiring, they always say like, you don't have to be the best coder in the world. You just have to meet a certain threshold of abilities. And after that, all we really care about is like, do I want to work with you or not? Because if you don't get the culture, if you're not someone I want to work with, then we don't want to hire you. And a lot of it is like team playing and like almost like a team sport, because a lot of what we do is so interactive with one another. And if I write a piece that needs to communicate with your piece and we just don't have a good chemistry, we don't have a good relationship, then it becomes very difficult to develop the software.
It definitely shows. And back to your point, it's like code reviews is definitely part of the job. Like your code is going to be looked at by everyone. And
Yeah.
people will have criticism. Like we have one engineer that's super, super particular about naming. And I loved it because
Yeah.
it helped, like, me, AJ. Like when I first coded, I had horrible variable names. Like I would just be calling
Yeah.
them like single letters. But I think that one engineer at our company that's very particular about naming just helped improve me naming variables and stuff like that. And it's just
Yeah.
like how you approach it. It is exactly right. It's like you can be confrontational about it, or you can absorb the. It's not really criticism. It's just like, like knowledge sharing in a way.
It's really interesting that sometimes I'll go into companies and I can tell, like, so one thing about coding that's very interesting to me is that it can automate so many things and it can remove so many problems. And a lot of times you look at people's jobs, you're like, man, like we can just code away this whole department. We don't even need it. Like, is there any unique ways that you feel Figs uses code to solve problems or reduce the manpower or difficulty to, like how do you guys use code to like reduce the amount of manpower it is to, you know, run your business?
Not even on Figs on a personal level. Even like I think that was the one thing that got me into coding is just doing a lot of redundant stuff. Like
Uh-huh.
they once paid me to stay on Wednesday up until like 6-7 p.m. So basically, I sat around for 3 hours doing nothing to send out an email. And I'm thinking like, why are you paying this dude who's probably being paid like 20-30 dollars an hour to just sit around so you can send an email at 7 p.m. Like, couldn't that be
Yeah.
automated in some way, some form?
Yeah.
Uh, so there's that aspect. I don't think necessarily it's. I mean, I was happy to receive that money, but at the same time, I'm like, I could be doing other things, like
Exactly.
opportunity cost. I think with any company, especially on a small size where resources are really low, you don't want to do anything unless you can do things at scale. And with code just scales really well. And that's the simple truth
Yeah.
of it. Like there's a lot of services, there's a lot of things you can do things with one person that would take like an army to do it. And yeah, I think that's always like the fundamental questions between like, oh, like is this really providing jobs or not? But I think that's a deeper philosophical question to move on. But I think in the mindset, it's like we definitely want at least not the redundant mundane tasks should be automated for sure.
Do you have an
And
example of something?
things really.
Yeah. Do you have an example of something where you guys were able to reduce the redundancy through code?
I'll give you like an example. Like so a similar aspect. This one employee had to send out this report on Friday night. That report relied on another company publishing information, right? It wasn't particularly my department. It's another department that's finance that has sort of like a developer in finance, but he's like really basic script development. He basically wrote a script that just taps into that company's API. And then suddenly this employee didn't have to wait till the company publishes their stuff to send things out, type of thing. Yeah, so that email that goes out every night, it's completely automated. It's not even an email anymore. It can be like a website now. So
That's awesome. Yeah, that I actually did something similar. I work for a company where we acquired a new small company, and the data between the two companies were not, of course, they're separated, right? And so they wanted to merge them so they can do the inventory together. And so I think like after every night they would send an email with their like an Excel sheet with their like numbers and stuff like that, and we'd have to match them. I don't really understand the specifics, but initially we were having people do it by hand, like inputting data input by hand, and then they tasked me to create a service to basically take that email and then automatically put it into the database. And it immediately took off somebody like an hour or 2 hours a day of their role of stuff to do. And the best part about it is that code oftentimes it usually absorbs the mundane, boring stuff that we don't want to do. And then that gives us a little bit more room to do the more creative stuff, which is probably more fulfilling for the most of us.
Yeah, it's just like that. Oh, Dudo was like creating the email, or me in general. Like I get to use that time to do something that's requires a little bit more brain power than just sticking around sending an email type of thing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what if you were to fast forward 10 years, where do you see the future of e-commerce? Since you have such great insight into the whole e-commerce world, what do you think is going to change in 10 years time?
I think there was a lot of talk last year about where customer data was coming from. In terms of the not really, like the more stricter privacy laws in terms of Facebook and Google.
Yeah.
So in my personal opinion, if the fidelity of data is kind of hard to abstract, get from applications that we use every day, because there's a lot of stuff online for sale, right? Like Amazon's very convenient. Everyone knows the Amazon app. They go online, they search for it. But in reality, if you didn't want to buy from Amazon, where do you go? You go to Google to search, and like you have to know what to type. You have to be good at SEO. So really, it's the other e-commerce as it exists now. It's the other way around, right? We pay Facebook, we pay Instagram to show you things that Instagram thinks you like. So it's like sort of sorting out the chaos a little bit, and there's a lot of people that sell products, and it's really curating it just for you in your application. Now, there's a talk where it's going to be in the beginning. I think it's going to be a lot more influencer driven, because if
Really?
we can't target ads, like, hey, I know people 30-year-olds who work in hospitals who like to drink coffee in the morning or whatever like that, would love buying my scrub sets. If we can't collect that data, then it's like, where can we do it? We hire influence that has the demographic that follows them. So we're going to
Wow.
I think a lot of e-commerce require like more influencing sales from influencers. I know in China it's really big to go on these streaming, like basic QVC, but online, where you watch someone who maybe you trust a lot more kind of sell the product, but live streaming selling the product. I know that's a trend in China, and there's a few startups in here that are like that. But yeah, I think there might be a little bit more push towards that way, where e-commerce is coming. I know because of this, like Instagram's trying to bring a lot more selling inside their application. So they're trying to become a Shopify in some way, some form. Shopify/Amazon, where, hey, you have your Instagram page, you're already doing this brand thing. Well, people can buy stuff on Instagram and not ever have to leave the Instagram ecosystem. So they don't have to deal with the whole data sharing with other applications because it's all internal. That could be another push. It's hard to say right now. It really is. It's like during COVID, this stuff accelerated because it's like e-com, buying stuff online because of lockdowns and stuff like that. Now that lockdowns are down, retail's a little bit coming back, but not the same. And I kind of think it's kind of slowed down a little bit in terms of that kind of direction.
Do you guys think you'll ever have a brick and mortar presence, Figs?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It's debatable. I think the most that it's what value does a brick and mortar have? I don't have the answer to that.
Interesting. All right, so that's the end of my questions. Does anyone else have any questions?
I do. I was about to ask if I can ask questions.
Yeah.
You can catch me. What do you want to ask?
Okay, I'll have like 4 questions. I'll let somebody else ask first in case I have too many questions.
I have 5 questions, so go ahead.
Oh wow. Okay.
Oh wow.
Why don't you guys go ping pong?
Yeah, it should give us more time for questions. Okay, I'll start. So when you started to study coding, did you know that you wanted to get into this field from the beginning, or did you learn to love coding?
No.
During the process.
I think it was mostly pushing from AJ, to tell you the truth. Truthfully, it was pushing from AJ. Because you know me, like after the first, I was like, I like it, but I always saw it as a hobby, kind of just accentuated my day-to-day work. Like to me, it provided more value proposition as a employee over the other person. But I started to really like it just because of I come from a business mindset, and it's just really refreshing when you can develop something the way you want it to and operate the way you want it to. So that aspect, and thanks for AJ for pushing me towards getting a job in the field. But no, like to answer your question, it was not on my site. I had no ambitions of wanting to be a developer. I was kind of nervous at it and all the interview stuff, but I think with proper motivation, I'm now here and loving it.
Rick?
Well, yeah, hi. Yeah, thanks. In fact, I missed about the first 5 minutes of this. I hope you have a recording. I was on another call in my ear, so I didn't hear it. But this is really good. I'd love to hear the recording. You know, I was going to ask. I'm a software engineer too, full stack developer. I've worked some in fashion industry, but it's been a while. I live down here in Manhattan Beach, and in the beach cities, it's kind of like a mini Melrose. It's like there are people here who have boutiques, and some of them are on Amazon. Some of these are friends of mine or wives of friends of mine, quite frankly, you know, running clothing stores and things. Some of them are on Amazon. Some of them are they just do a lot of word of mouth because people know each other down here. So I was curious, like, and sometimes people ask me, you know, should I get on Shopify? Should I get my own shop? So let me ask you, because Ambrose, you've been asking these excellent questions. So, like, what's a good decision point where someone who's running a small boutique should look at Shopify? Like, what's the break-even point on that, if you will?
I would say, like, when AJ asked if we sold on Shopify, I think everyone sells in when AJ asked if we sold on Amazon, it might have seemed like the answer was no. But in the beginning, everyone sells on Amazon. It's just like you have to play with them no matter what.
Right.
But as the brand grew, and when you devote more resources to your Shopify store and your brand grew, you can kind of curtail the Amazon part. It was just a nice to have. Maybe we use Amazon as sort of like almost like a discovery channel, like a sales channel. Maybe there's a lot of times where people see stuff on Amazon like, oh, it's cheaper on their website, or I can go directly to the website or stuff like that. It really depends. And Amazon, I would say the people that go on Amazon tend to focus on different things. Like nobody ever buys really small. Well, maybe people buy small stuff, but there's certain products that people don't feel comfortable buying on Amazon. Clothing being one of them. So that's why Shopify is really popular. But back to your question about when you should go to Shopify, it's really about the experience, I would say. It's like how much control you want over the experience.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Pink Cashmere? Or anyone else?
Yes.
Like Sherry or Sam? You have a question
sorry,
either?
Sherry.
I don't think so. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, my next question. You mentioned earlier, you said that it's about hiring. You said the smaller company would want to hire more experienced developer. I guess one of the reasons will be there's not enough, but to fool around. And you said bigger company actually can afford all level of developers. So as a new developer, I'm not, but I'm saying like for a new developer, do you suggest to apply for a bigger company to begin with? Is that what you're suggesting?
I think I struggled with this question very early. Yeah, I understand your questions. Like I struggled with this question like when I first got into business. On the one hand, I felt like my chances were better with a smaller startup company. Like I could go in there and make a huge impact, but at the same time, they kind of want a super, super senior person that can do everything, right? I think it really comes down to selling yourself and being confident with your skill set. I knew when I was coming in that, perhaps a smaller company, they want the Facebook guy, or they want like these people from these big companies, but they don't necessarily have the salary aspect to match them. It's really convincing them that you're a better value proposition. Like I can come in here, be confident of your skill set, and really ask clear questions what they're expecting. Like when I first interviewed, like they were very explicit on what application they want and what it wanted to do. And I talked about the developer in me, kind of go through the logical aspect of it. It's like, oh, the database will have to be this. Can it be microserviced out? Type of thing. Really go through that process. And I think that's pretty. I think it's hard to say, like, because I felt my chances were better with a smaller company, but a lot more difficult with them. But the skill sets were more demanding. But I was willing to do it, if that makes sense. Like, I was willing to put in the effort, learn a bit more, and push myself, so I can be more attractive to the smaller startup. And it became a problem where when you design all the systems yourself very early on, and when you hire the new guys and they're coming in and they're slowly taking on responsibilities, you're in your mindset. I know the second year I'm working, I was like, oh man, I really want to learn everything. I really want to know what they're doing with Next.js, but the company grew so big that you can't possibly knew what every little developer or department was doing. So part of mindset was like, as we grew, was just letting go. Like, I know it's your baby and you kind of designed the early systems early on, but it's to the point where it's, let people take care of it now and kind of focus on your work too.
Rick, you have a question?
Yeah, I was just kidding about having 5. I just wanted to do pink cashmere. But let me ask you this one though. You had mentioned, I did think of another one though. So you'd mentioned, I guess it was working at Fig. I forget how you said it, but you reached the limitations of Shopify or something about like that. So, because that's another thing that people ask me, is they're looking for very specific customer experiences in their boutiques. So they might want something a little more customer oriented. But sorry, put that aside for a minute. So what were the limitations that? Well, are you still using Shopify at Fig?
We still are. There's a notion in the e-com world of headless sites, meaning completely detached from Shopify. The templating, like just stripping Shopify down to literally the checkout in a CMS, and you can communicate through their API. A headless site completely separate from Shopify. Communicate with, because if you do everything in Shopify, it's still very old school HTML templating languages. There's a limitation to that. React just deals with data a lot more, and because API inherently is data being fed back, React and those front-end frameworks just handles it a lot better than doing JavaScript. Because if you were doing JavaScript, you would have to do click interaction. You need to worry about the data because you're mutating data and all this stuff, and it has rippling effects for every little component. But in React, you don't have to worry about the event. You just worry about the change in data, which is why, like, when you get to a certain size, and you come to a certain size where you have a lot of data, headless site is definitely a way to go because it reacts to data in a way. Your JavaScript file would be massive if we did this in jQuery or something like that.
Great, and if I may, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, back to your question about the issues. There's 2 very public ones. Well, not really public, but 2 issues with subscriptions, right? Like a lot of people wanted recurring payments. They wanted to sell stuff that just replenishes. Shopify had a solution to it, right? Like, but it was in development. Now, if you were a store that was selling a subscription service, do you want to wait for Shopify to deliver that subscription service? It ultimately took them 2-3 years to do it, even though they kept on saying it was going to be next year. You have no control over their product roadmap. And I can tell you the way Shopify works, it's such a massive company and such a massive monolith that adding features is not easy. It's literally like a fundamental tear in their code. So it's very difficult.
That's great. Since you mentioned, so what would you look for replenishment then?
So you can create your own app to do it. It might be slightly janky, but maybe you can use their API to create a checkout every month and send an email out so the customer can do a one-click checkout type of thing. You can integrate other services like Stripe. Stripe has a card vaulting thing. So one of the interesting thing about subscription services, you obviously don't want to store credit card information anywhere, right? So the credit card companies have to have a vaulting system, meaning you give them your credit card, it returns a token, and you store that token. So the tokens can be invalidated really easily, but a credit card can't. So Shopify was obviously building out the service. Stripe has been in it in the early game. So, integrated with Stripe. But now Shopify has a subscription service. Another thing was that with all colors and variant, so a product has a variant. So a shirt could have a small, medium, large, right? Now there was a limit, 99, meaning a product can only have 99 variants. Every combination of this shirt can only be 99. And at Figs, with every color, every fit, we exceeded that 99. So that was early on. And Shopify actually undid this limit last year. But if we would have waited for it, our company obviously couldn't have grown. We would have to wait 3 years until Shopify had a solution for it. So this is where we reached the limits very early on, knowing that the limit. In fact, Shopify told us themselves they don't like to use the word enterprise. It's a bad word over there.
Ah.
But it is like we are enterprise customer. We are power users at this point, and it's their main business, their main focus is still on these like small boutique shops, like the D2C stuff. Knowing that we do provide a significant income, their main marketing aspect is just allow anyone to go on there and sell without any friction.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. And Rick, if you want to exchange contact information, you can always reach out to me for any more information.
Love that. Thank you. I'll probably take advantage of that.
Yeah.
Sherry had a question. What's a headless site?
So a headless site. So in like a traditional Django sense or Shopify sense, you have HTML templates that gets rendered on the server. So every time you visit a website, it pings the server, it renders out that HTML and spits it back. Now a headless site is saying that these HTML templates can be cached on the front end, and the data is what propagates. So instead of having the server render the visual aspect of it, it's already pre-rendered, like a blank HTML site, if that makes sense. But the little variables, they get filled in when that API comes back. So they ping the server for the data. It's a blank website with all the visuals, but the boxes would be there and stuff like that. It's completely empty. When the data comes back, it basically propagates the website. And that's what headless means. It lives completely separate from Shopify. So in us, we would stash in a CDN because nothing really changes. It's just static blank HTML.
Okay, cool. Do we have any last questions? Pink Cashmere, do you still have any more questions, or do you have any more?
You said you have 4. Come on. Only counted 2.
I did, but I don't want to take up more of your time.
No, go ahead. I'm already committed.
But I do want to comment what Riz said about, like, what is it better to Shopify or Amazon? I think like I don't like to buy clothes from Amazon, just from a woman point of view, since I like to go shopping for clothes. It just feels like, it doesn't have the customer service that's needed from Amazon. Like as far as like, the quality, the description of the quality, the clothes.
I think the value position from Amazon is allowing like a really easy return policy and logistics. Now, that's not to say you can't do it on Shopify, because there's these companies that have services, like one based out of LA called Happy Returns. We use Loop Return, so Shopify doesn't have a native returns integration. It's actually an application. These applications were created by the really early stores on the website. So Chubby's was one of the original early Shopify stores. And they're like, well, Shopify doesn't have a way of returning stuff. So they hired a developer to create this return system that's an application that integrates with Shopify. And they eventually spun that out into a separate company, which now has become the de facto service for returns on Shopify. But the one in LA, Happy Returns, they have this thing called a Happy Return Bar. So they teamed up with a lot of department stores and malls and stuff like that to have these places where if you order something from, let's say, Figs or anywhere else and don't like it, you can actually physically drive to that store and return it. So you don't have to worry about packaging it, driving to FedEx office. You can literally drive to a physical location, drop it off, they will do all the QCing for you, making sure that it's the right product and stuff, and return it back to you. So Shopify created this whole ecosystem of like of trying to solve those issues. Really, like the logistics aspect is trying to get solved right now. A brand that comes to mind is Anchor. You know, the one that sells the batteries on Amazon. Well, they become so successful on Amazon that they kind of spun out into their own brand now. So they have their own website. It used to be you can only purchase it on Amazon, but I guess they build their brand up so nicely on Amazon that they kind of trying to disassociate themselves and move away from Amazon.
Interesting. Any last questions? Rick, do you have any more?
I'll let it go. Thank you.
You sure? You can ask.
Yeah.
Now's a good time.
I don't mind. I love talking about this stuff.
Sherry or Sam, do you guys have any last questions? Or Pink Cashmere?
I do have one last question.
Okay, one last question. Let's go.
Okay, last one. You talk about the right motivation. So you mentioned also, like you mentioned, having fun is one of the motivations. Do you have to be savvy in technologies to learn coding, or is it just because I like to play with my phone, I like to play with my iPad? I mean, is that good enough, or do you have to be really good with technology to learn coding?
I think there needs to be some knowledge of the medium that is used to interact. But when we say coding, I think there's a lot of different type of coding, right? So not everyone should be a full stack. Not everyone should be a back end. There's front ends. There's UI people that needs coding. There's even advertising people that needs coding, like those Google Pixels and stuff like that. So we have like I think they call them ad ops engineers. Like they solely exist to support the marketing and advertising team. So they don't have to go over and get engineering resources to write these pixel codes. So that guy would know really basic JavaScript because all these pixels are and tags are written in JavaScript. But he can also automate things like product feeds, you know. So it's really, but I think you have to have a level of interest to know how the process is done or learn how the process is done. But in terms of the actual coding aspect, there's a lot of different coding. So if someone is not a data-driven person, maybe they can be more a visual person. We have a front-end engineer who is devoted to CSS transitions. Like, believe it or not, there are front-end engineers that are good, but they might be really crappy at CSS. And you might thinking like, oh, a front-end engineer who does CSS. Yes, but how good are they at CSS? So there's, again, specialties. We have an engineer who is like really effing good at CSS. We have a front-end engineer who's really good at React, and another front-end engineer who's really good at data and API. So it's really just find where you're interested in, really.
Cool. Rick, you have a question?
Yeah, I'll ask you a question on that if you don't mind. That just reminded me. So I'm sorry, did you say like Shopify, is that written in Django, Python, or?
They're interesting, yeah. Shopify is the original Ruby on Rails people. So I can tell you a really interesting story how they started.
Please.
Over in LA, we have Dollar Shave Club. In Toronto, there was this guy named Toby that was selling snowboards, right? He's a Ruby developer. He's like one of the core Ruby developers. He loves Ruby on Rails. So he's like, this was like early 2000s. He's like, I'm going to create an online store. And he sold snowboards online. However, he slowly thought like, whoa, I can spin this into a service and allow other people to sell stuff online. So he actually created rumor was it was a fork from like Spree, something that was already created for Ruby on Rails on Shopify. So a lot of interesting part is that Shopify is the biggest Ruby community there is. Like, they have employees devoted to just maintaining Ruby on Rails and Ruby as a language because it's so integral to them as a company. So I would say Shopify, Airbnb, and GitHub were the original Ruby people. And same thing happened with Dollar Shave Club. They used Spree and sold online. However, they didn't go into servicing their platform. They just like, we're going to stick to razors. And they sold razors. So that was an interesting story about how they pivoted and became the behemoth they are, and another company just sticking to what they did.
Interesting. Can I follow on that one?
Yeah,
please.
go
And it's kind of funny to Pink Cashmere's point. I was going to say I just finished a long contract, spent a few weeks. Now I'm starting another one on Monday. So yeah, it's a pretty good market right now. But and a couple of things I noticed is Amazon is hiring in Los Angeles for virtual try-ons. If that helps, I don't think it will because I've seen this kind of thing before. But hey, at least they're trying on that. Another thing I noticed is that Shopify is advertising for like front end extension people, and they're saying like of all varieties, everything. I think React, Angular, Express, possibly .NET. Do you know like what's good extension technologies to use for Shopify?
I would say off the bat, Rails and Node. It seems to be the most supported ones over there. But I will tell you this about Shopify: they are an e-com business, but they're really a tech firm. One thing they're gonna adopt, and they've been very public about this, is WebAssembly. So they're gonna allow basically what WebAssembly is that you can code in any language you want, Rust, C++, whatever. It's going to compile down into assembly language. The reason why they're doing this is because browsers just joined a new standard, WebAssembly standard. So browsers are going to be able to run assembly languages in the future, which for Shopify, it used to be you have to write Ruby to do a little bit scripting in Shopify. But now they're saying you can embed applications within Shopify just because they all compile down to assembly language. So it doesn't matter what language. But back to your question, it is Ruby. They do have packages. They even have a CLI that will spin up these applications for you. But it's all written in Node and Ruby.
Can I follow on that a little bit more since you brought up WebAssembly? So the only tool I've seen implementing WebAssembly right now is Blazor. Blazor.net. You can run C# on the browser. It's a big download. They're working to get the download down. Do you know what are the other most advanced alternatives for WebAssembly technology-wise?
You know how a lot of these traditional software that run on your computer are now web-based? Well, that's because of WebAssembly, right? Like Photoshop can be done online on your browser now. That's all because of WebAssembly. So it is catching on. It's in a little bit of an early stage right now, but it's being fostered by some big players. So Shopify has been very public about this is the direction they're heading towards.
Interesting. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we're good. No more questions, right?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Kelvin, for being super generous with your time. That was really awesome. And I think we learned a lot about Shopify and how the future of e-commerce rolls out.
Yeah, and Rick, if you want to ping me on Meetup or ping AJ or something like that, we can.
Yeah, Rick, if you want to put in the comments that you want to contact Kelvin, I can actually connect you with him. I'll give you his email. Do you want his email, Kelvin? You want to give his email to him?
We can, email. Whatever.
Yeah. So if you just comment on the Meetup event, and I can send it to you personally. Okay.
Sounds good. Great. It's outstanding.
All right.
I learned a lot. Thank you very much.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Interesting. It is. I love the e-com space because it's mixing developing with something more tangible. And everyone says like e-com is kind of cool because it's a defined goal, right? Like at the end, you just want someone to buy something. Like goals for other tech companies might not be so apparent, but in e-com is very apparent. As long as they buy something, you're happy.
Very cool. Kelvin, did you see Rick's email address in the comment?
Yes.
Yeah, maybe you can just email him directly.
Thank you.
All right. Well, nice meeting everyone. Nice talking to everyone.
All right. So
Thank
I
you.
also want to remind everyone that there's this Sunday we have a hike on Popcorn Robot Meetup. So if you guys want to do that, just to get out fresh air, meet other developers, that'd be great. And again, thank you for attending. And again, thank you, Kelvin, for being super generous with your time.
Yeah, no problem. Later, guys.
All right. Take care, guys.
Fantastic.
Bye.
Thank you.